3, 2, 1.
This is The Jungle, an up-close, unvarnished look inside leadership and business strategy. We wade into the real-world leaders' face and explore what they do to create a path forward, because that's what business is. Wild, exciting.
It's The Jungle.
Welcome to the Jungle, Doug. Oh, wait. Doug took the day off on us. So anybody tuning in, hoping to listen to Doug today, he's not here. He took the day off of our podcast. He had some emergencies, in air quotes, to deal with. So we invited a guest speaker, Craig Hopkins, to join us. He wasn't part of the banter, but he joins us for an excellent interview of Keith Valentine. It was a tremendous interview and occasion to spend some time with Keith. Keith has over 30 years of experience in the medical device industry. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer of SeaSpine Holdings, a publicly traded medical device company. Before there, he was the President and Chief Operating Officer of NuVasive. And before that, he spent time at Medtronic. So he's got over 30 years in the medical device industry, currently serving as the CEO of a medical device company, and he serves on the board of another medical device company. So outstanding talent, grad of Western Michigan University, which makes this even more impactful for us to do. So Craig Hopkins, the CIO of the City of San Antonio, decided to join us for the podcast. You'll be listening to the discussion between myself, Craig, and Keith. Takeaways. I don't know what Craig's takeaways was, but he had some great questions. I'm going to go right to innovation and how you drive innovation through space. One of the things Keith said was critical, was that they changed their whole space to drive innovation. And in today's world where people are talking about working from home, working from the office, going back and forth, how we get things done, how we get high performing teams remotely or hybrid, Keith really put a big emphasis, and shout out to Haworth, who is the namesake of our College of Business, who functions and delivers high performing spaces for companies. Keith talked about his home office remodel once he took over and getting everybody in the same building doing the same thing. I won't tell you where it is, but I kind of want to go visit. And that was incredible. And we're noticing some of that here in the Leadership and Business Strategy major and Sleeping Giant Capital, how we redesigned some spaces to be cutting edge for education. And we're actually seeing the results of a lot of that. How we work with individuals, how we work across individuals, how we use whiteboards, how we collaborate, how we innovate along our processes and some of our outcomes that we hope to drive for. So Keith was big on that and really providing unique space for what it has to be. Now take that going forward, there's a lot of interesting facts there, right? Like, what will people do when they're in the office? How many days will they be at home? How many days will they be in person? What activities require in-person, face-to-face activities versus all virtual? And even a broader conversation of how you can, talent can overcome maybe the ineffectiveness of virtual teams. Is there new tools and technologies coming out that can replace that? So lots to look forward to. Keith had a perspective on it, and it was really interesting how he wanted people to be face-to-face to help serve all of their customers, including their internal customers that they have to serve every day. So it was a great conversation. Sorry if you're missing Doug. Doug was not able to join us. You kind of get an idea who took the first day off. Was it me or him? It was definitely him. So I'll hold that over his head that he took the first day off from the podcast. And I hope you enjoy this episode of The Jungle with a CEO of SeaSpine Holdings, Keith Valentine.
The Jungle is produced by the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy in Western Michigan University's Haworth College of Business. Our center supports the Leadership and Business Strategy major, conducts large-scale consulting projects, and trains professionals in acquiring and operating small businesses. To learn more, visit wmich.edu/leadership center.
Keith, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Jungle.
Thank you for having me on Jungle. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, Craig, welcome to Jungle. We have an interesting podcast today. It's a little different. So, welcome to Jungle, Craig.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it.
Let's do a cheers first. What's everybody drinking? Is everybody got coffee?
We all have RBS coffee.
Coffee. So I've never had all coffee before because Doug's not a coffee drinker. He's always got tea or some weird drink with him. But the first time all coffee.
I'm Ted Lasso, no tea.
No tea?
No tea.
So let me give you a little introduction for the listeners. Doug couldn't be here today. He had some personal issues, so we have a unique podcast today where we have two distinguished Alumni Award winners from Western. One co-hosting, that's Craig Hopkins, who won the Distinguished Award from the Department of Management, and this year's Distinguished Haworth College of Business Alumni Award winning Keith. And so this is exciting. So I'm going to let Craig and Keith just talk to each other, and I'm just going to sit back and do nothing. Just kidding. But welcome. So let's start. Let's give a little background about yourself, Keith. Tell us about what year did you graduate from Western?
So 1990.
1990.
Yeah.
And you are now the CEO of a publicly traded company and serve on the board of another publicly traded company.
That's correct.
Let's talk. What year did you graduate, Craig?
My MBA in 97.
MBA in 97. Okay, so I don't want to date you guys, but it's a few years back.
We're fine being 90s boys.
We
90s boys.
We have lots of wisdom.
Yeah,
Possibly. I started university in 2000, if that makes you guys feel better. So tell us about, as a student of Western, you graduated in 1990, in the 90s, boy. How did you get from where you are today from there? So.
Yeah, I think it's just fortunate. I actually came through the program, and the reason I fell in love with the Western program was the flexibility. I wanted to do pre-med and business, kind of a unique major, and a lot of colleges that I talked to wanted to structure it one way or the other, and it was really Western that said, great, we don't really have a specific program, but it's absolutely possible, and here's how you can do it, and they put a map together that helped me understand how I could navigate. And so I felt fortunate that when I graduated, I no longer had interest in going into medicine, but got the best of both worlds. Got a great opportunity right out of college with Stryker, and in 1990 I moved west. They moved me to a division that was newly started called endoscopy, and it literally was that opportunity that put together wonderful relationships with leaders, like leaders that then would recruit me into other areas of med device. And I'd love to say that I mapped it out and said, this is going to be the best direction for me, but it wasn't. It was fortunate. It was fortunate that met these relationships, trusted them, and one of them happened to go to now the largest spine company in our spine implant company in our business, and I had an opportunity very early days to be part of a spine company. So I've been in spine for over 30 years, and that's been my focus and love. But med device was the first opportunity out of college, and Western provided that locally here with Stryker.
So this is a great lesson for young leaders and students. So what advice do you have? You said, I wish I had mapped it. I came here, I wanted to do medical and business. I realized when I was here, I changed my mind, went to med device. What would you tell a young leader or student about that may be sitting around saying, I don't have it all mapped out, I don't have it all planned, I don't know, or I think I'm going to change my plan? What advice would you give to that young student or leader?
Yeah, I feel like this is advice that I talk a lot with young students coming out. Just got done, talking with my son about it, who graduated recently. I think that the reality is you go into an opportunity and bring passion and really drive. What are you going to do to put your fingerprint on the opportunity? And I think it becomes, if that's genuinely your mission, and it's not a political goal, meaning you're not doing it in a bureaucratic political way, you're instead doing it because it inspires you, the goodness will come, meaning you're going to build relationships, you're going to see a part of the organization, and you're going to realize what it is that's going to be your future direction. And embrace it and go with it. And for me, I really did realize that at the time it was international marketing and sales that just was so interesting and adventurous, right? I mean, every time you jumped on an airplane and went to a new market, it literally was a new challenge, right? They needed something much different than the last market you were in. But you have to bury yourself in it. You have to realize that you're going to be maybe sometimes above, or you're going to be feeling like the water hose is on you and you're swimming, right? It's that drowning feeling, and you just have to continue to drive forward with it. And it inspired me. It inspired me to say, med device is the right place for where I can grow.
One of the things Derek and I talk about a lot is this kind of functional expertise has got to be the thing that drives you. I got to go to the right school, get the right degree, have the right paperwork on my resume, and that's what's important. And then when I get out in the world, all the doors will open, right? I think we've all learned that that's a piece of the puzzle. That's not the primary. So what are kind of the advice you give looking back to students as well that says, not only develop that functional expertise, but what about your human skills or your leadership skills that need to be developed before you get out there as well?
Yeah, it's funny. We have something we call touchstones at SeaSpine, and it's kind of these characteristics that we feel as a leadership team are most important in the employees that we want to be part of the organization. And they're pretty broad, but one of them that fits that question so well is street smart. And for me, street smart is about that. Like there's no question there are great universities that prepare students in a very intelligent way, but are they leaving being street smart? And I think we know that, well, at least I know in my experience that I had at Western, the programs that I was part of and that I got inspired by, I feel had me more street smart for business. I felt it had me be more dynamic in how I approach a problem. And I think what I try to also see in the employees that we bring aboard is how do they exhibit that? What have they done in their past that can give me good examples of just making decisions on the fly and then adjusting as those decisions maybe needed some refinement, so to speak. And that's where I think, and that's where we like to recruit from is bring aboard people that exhibit that street smart. I mean, there's a lot of other touchstones that are extremely important to our organization, but that's a key one. A key one is it's not just about did you come from the right background and degree and everything else. Can you really adjust on the fly to a difficult circumstance that comes up without feeling like you're a deer in the headlights?
Well, we should start using that in LBS. The street, what's your street smart? We're gonna start measuring that.
Right.
So let's just talk just about that one. What do you look for? How do you assess it? Is there sub parts of street smart that you look for? Or is it just like you somehow hope they have street smart? Like what's the?
Yeah, I mean, on interviewing, a lot of it gets into really trying to drive into a time in their recent past that they've had difficult decisions to make and how they made them. And what I get more impressed by is them being honest and saying, well, here's the direction we went, but this is what we found out, and so this is how we adjusted, right? Because I think that's what business is about. Good gosh, look at what we've just gone through with COVID. It's about a lot of different adjustments. I'd love to tell you that we started off and made the right decisions first. We didn't. We just made adjustments and kept refining it as we went along. And I think that you want to try to figure out as you're talking to folks, what are those examples where they've had that? And maybe it's even in their education. Maybe they just realized that they were going down one pathway in business or whatever their major was and realized this really isn't where my passion was, and I made a shift. And I think we get those folks that just want to say, well, I ground through it. Everything that I have, I've earned, right? Those probably aren't the right fit for the company that we're creating at SeaSpine.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that, this is the banter we're going to have to figure out how we jump in and out of this, right?
That's why it's casual. We no need for it.
So a lot of times when we get to our senior roles in our career, we didn't get there quickly, right? It took us time to get there. And younger folks look at us and say, hey, I want to be the CEO. I want to be the chief information officer. So I want to be, and by the way, sometimes it has to do with your title and pay, right? That goes with that. And so the assumption is, what do I do to get into your role? And we all have different stories. We've all gotten into our roles in different ways. What's an experience in your career where you've failed or you didn't have the street smarts and you learned the street smarts? And I think those are important stories for us to tell people that it's not always smooth in our careers, right? And you're going to go through things and you're going to learn from them. I don't know if you have any specific situations you want to share.
Yeah, no, I do. After being with that first spine company and before going to the one that I was at the longest in NuVasive, I had a brief stop with an organization in the Bay Area. And I think I went there for the wrong reasons. I went there because new startup, they're gonna have an IPO. I'm gonna get aboard before the IPO. It was a great role. It was a head of marketing role. But as it turned out, I got lost. I got lost in all the things that are more exciting to the temporary excitement, maybe the IPO and all of that. And I lost track of the people, which has always been so important to me. It's the reason why I love being part of Danik, sophomore Danik, and ultimately Medtronic. It was about the people you were working with and inspired all in the same direction. And this wasn't that. This was, and it's not about the Bay Area, but it was in the Bay Area, and it was kind of a hot time in the Bay Area in early 2000, just before, there was a decline. And it was a frustrating experience. I made it for the wrong reasons. I ended up being there frustrated. I ended up feeling like there was no culture at the organization. The more I tried to impact it, the more I was put in line by leadership. And it became a very frustrating process for me, very demotivating too. And moving entire family from Memphis, Tennessee to the Bay Area was a whole nother challenge that made it worse that I didn't pick the right place. And at the time, there was folks that probably could have said, "I told you so." That I didn't feel, during the interview process, you didn't feel comfortable about this, but you still kind of put that aside because you were so excited about this other startup kind of experience. And so I do view that as a failure. I went against what the value system that I have in an organization. The good of that, the true good of that was I went to, then at the time, Nuvasive, which was very early startup, struggling, was not in their first dollar of sale, but it was all about the people and culture. It was just this wonderful experience that even in the toughest of times, you felt like you were with family getting through it. And so it was a great learning lesson. It was a learning lesson that, that'll never happen again. It's not going to be about the shiny polish and what it could mean on your resume. It has to be about the people that you can influence with.
That's great. All right, so this is a good segue. So let's move from personal journey onto your leadership, how you lead, the companies you're leading, and what you're seeing across the industries that you're working within. You talked about leading through COVID. You just mentioned that 2 questions ago, and now you're big on culture and people you're working with. So let's talk COVID. Last 2 years have been rough on a lot of businesses. There's been a lot of pivoting and changing and innovating, supply chain issues all the way around. What are some of the key lessons that you picked up as a leader of an organization during COVID that you would share to other leaders?
Yeah, I think the toughest time is when it first hit. We have a unique business in that the spinal implant side, which is half of our revenue, we do all the design and process, but we don't make those implants. Those implants are made by other manufacturers. On the orthobiologic side, which is a very important component to spine surgery, the product that's used to actually fuse the bone, we actually manufacture ourselves. We manufacture it about 40, 50 minutes north of our Carlsbad facility in Irvine. And that team is an incredible team. They are a very dedicated manufacturing, extremely high standards. We're taking donated human allograft and turning, one patient donation can impact hundreds of patients. And we take that gift of donation not only seriously, but we take it to the point that we want to make the most efficacious product to better influence other patients' lives. And that team also, we were extremely worried about when the shutdowns took place. Not only for their safety, but also for the fact that we're a small organization, we're not profitable. How do we maintain their jobs? How do we maintain their roles? And so that whole process immediately of worrying about now a family of 400 people. We're now 500 people after a recent acquisition, but at that time it was 400 people that we were extremely concerned about as a senior leadership team. How do we make sure they keep their roles? We don't want anyone to be furloughed. We don't want anyone to be laid off. But the reality is we're not a profitable company, and we have to figure out how we're going to navigate this. And I think that was one of the most stressful times I've had as a senior executive. You worry about their families. You worry about their own safety to come back. And at that time, it was just complete shutdown. So there was a time where the states realized, there is necessary work, and that is a necessary work. So, our opportunity first step was, we're able to stay open for another couple of weeks before the mandatory shutdown happens. Let's get as much supply on the shelves as we can. So at least we're committing to our hospital and surgeon customers that we're going to have the product. And then the next step was, during that 2 weeks, we have to now figure out how we're going to keep all of these folks whole with their families. And you can imagine the stress that was under that employee base of first working and then also worrying about the safety of their families.
Can you take that down a level? Because I think when we talk to people, there's the planning part. Let's look forward with whatever we know, limited information, we're going to be wrong, but if I know this, let's take this approach, a course of action for the company. But the layer below that's kind of the operational, what do we do, right? And so as an example, in the city of San Antonio, we had 7 days to literally shut down all services, send all employees home, and tell everybody basically stay in your house, right? And so in that 7 days, there was kind of an operational crisis. What was your leadership style in that 7 days? How did you work with your team? How did you motivate people? Kind of give people a view of what that time was like.
Yeah, as I said, it was extremely stressful. I have a senior leadership team. We ended up having daily calls, and at the time we're just getting introduced to more and more Zoom at the time, right? It wasn't. It all of a sudden became, now it's standard language, but then it was not as commonly used. But the reality was, I relied a lot on that operational expertise at the general manager level of the manufacturing facility, and then one of our SLT members is responsible for all of the orthobiologic portfolio. And so it really became their mission, and put a lot of trust in knowing that not only their capability, but how serious they were. I mean, they were the ones volunteering, take it out of my salary and pay these folks, right? And so there's no doubt that they were emotionally committed, as well as certainly very business committed to the opportunity. But I think most important, it was one of those kind of experiences where you see so many all hands on deck that you're inspired by it, right? So that you lose track of the time and the process, and all you're doing is just really listening to what their decisions are and doing a little bit of guiding, right? I mean, I can't even recall where it was like, no, I completely disagree with that. It was instead more of refinement. And what do the employees think? And what have you talked to them about? And how are we communicating to them? And so it really ended up being, for me, inspirational that their leadership had that strength, right? That they had that strength. And I would view it as crisis strength. I think you don't know the true strength of your leadership until you have a crisis.
Exactly.
So you went through that period. Is there anything that changed as a leader in that period that is still with the company today? Any processes or leadership lessons that you could share that we learned this stuff and then we still use it today?
Yeah, a few things. I think that being more periodic with meetings, like our senior leadership team, we were very good at having consistent meetings once every couple weeks that had weightier topics. This introduced a more frequent pace of a half-hour meeting a couple times a week, which we still generally keep, right? And just the realization that there's so many things that go on in the organization, despite the fact that they may not be super urgent, they are super aware. The leadership needs to be aware of it and be ahead of it, and truly driving it culturally into the organization. So I think from a cultural perspective, that's been something that's been helpful. The other thing we instituted pretty early on was just having a more relaxing Zoom meeting once a week, and we called it a happy hour. But just to make sure people are being heard, and you're seeing the faces, and you're understanding what their fears are, what their concerns are, and it ended up being probably as important for me that I had a lifeline to a lot of the folks. But I know that they've expressed, since we're more in a recovery now, that it was extremely important to them, their emotional well-being and understanding that other people are struggling through some of the same things. Not that misery loves company as much as it is that you just want to understand that other people are also struggling with some of the day-to-day activities that were challenging.
And how's your employee morale now? Right? I don't want to say we're out the other side yet, right? But we're in a different place. Right?
It's interesting. Employee morale is strong, but certainly coming back to work for a majority of the employee base, it was pretty straightforward. People were hungry to come back. And then there was certainly a percentage of the employee base that had some other issues to deal with, whether it was loved ones that they had to take care of, or children that still didn't have care patterns for the summer. Others still had maybe a fear of is the workplace safe, right? Is the workplace as safe as, and sometimes you have to deal with the fact that folks were, hey, I was successful when I wasn't coming to the office, and okay, we can define success, but that was kind of a core minimum, right? That wasn't like the ultimate goal was to be successful from home. Was a core expectation. Like we're helping patients every day. That's a core minimum, but what we really want to be is an outstanding organization. And to be outstanding, you have to collaborate, and to collaborate effectively, you have to be face-to-face a lot. And so it was kind of getting people to understand that, we're a company, as you'll come in, we do a lot of visits with surgeons that train them in our cadaver lab and talk with engineers and marketing folks about how to make the products better. That gets done most effectively face-to-face. When we're recruiting salespeople, the best tool we have is come to the office and see our culture. And I could talk about the culture for hours, but you walking through the door and feeling it is much more dramatic than me telling you about it. And so those are the kind of things that we had to reinstill, that yes, I appreciate the fact that there's concerns, but we are a collaborative culture, and part of that collaboration is you need to be in the office. Now, do you need to be in it 5 days a week? No, you don't. You don't. And we can accommodate things now that we probably didn't accommodate as much pre-COVID. But I still prescribe that in order for us to be successful, we have to be collaborating, and collaboration doesn't do well from a distance.
So let's dig in there just a little bit, because anybody listening to this, if they're a senior leader or they're an employee, this is a hot button topic right now, right? Do you have your employees come back to the office? Do you allow them to work from home? Do you allow some hybrid? How did your company go about making that decision? And then why do you believe that decision is probably the right one? I think I heard some of it with collaboration. We are extremely collaborative. That has to happen in person, but maybe we don't have to be there all the time. Is that where we landed with your company, and how'd you get?
Yeah, we landed that everyone's got their own personal situations, and like it or not, I mean, most states have some level of back to school, but the back to school has loads of problems. I mean, whether the student has a runny nose and it's a cold, they're out until they're tested negative, for example, in areas of where we're focused on in California, and so you have to be able to accommodate those. My feeling is that there are roles, certainly there are roles that don't have to be in the office every day, and we probably even accommodated that even before COVID. If someone was living in another state, for example, and didn't want to move to San Diego, which is a difficult place from a cost of living, we would accommodate that. But the reality is that we'll accommodate a couple days a week, but I'm not interested if you're living in the same community and you're an important part of what we view as the collaborative team of being 5 days away, right? Or being a couple hours a week in the office. I just don't find that to be part of the spirit of what we're creating in our organization. And I think we saw signs of it. We saw signs of stress. We still design new products, we still launch new products during COVID, but did we do it as well when we were all together? I think if we critically evaluate it, we'd say no.
So what's fun there is, well, I don't know if fun's the right word, right? but I think in our corporate culture, we've kind of gotten into this, do you have to be in the office or do you need to be at home, right? We get focused on which decision do I have to make? And I think we acquiesce to hybrid, something in the middle. Right? But the reality is we want high-performing teams. So it shouldn't matter whether you're in the office or on the road or at home, whatever it is. The outcome that we're looking for is a high-performing team. Right. And I heard you say that in kind of your culture, right? So in order to understand the culture, in order to be able to become a high-performing team, there are things you should do face-to-face that are important to you to do. So I think we need to stop asking people, is working from home or working from the road or working in the office the right answer? The answer is, what's the culture of my organization and what does it mean to be a high-performing team? And if we trust our people, they will do the right thing for that outcome. Yeah. So to that point, what do you, in your culture, what do you see as a high-performing team? When you think of a team that you have in your shop that's high performing, what are the kind of the words you use to demonstrate that? And I would assume you also have some that maybe are not high performing, right? That you would coach them as to, this is what I need you to do, regardless of whether you're working or home and in the office.
Yeah, and I think it's a great comment, because that's where we've now evolved to. We've evolved to that as requests come in for some sort of hybrid arrangement, that's the questions we're asking. Can they do the function successfully from a distance, or whatever that distance is, whether it's two days a week, 3 days a week, whatever it is? B, are they in a management role where their teams can still be successful despite that distance? And then 3, generally for that team and group and folks that rely on them, can they still be relied on by being remote? And so, yes, you're absolutely right. I think we as a leadership team have looked at it in that regard. There are teams that are extremely high performing, they're extremely functional. I do believe that the management structure that's in place can deal with how they need to make adjustments for when they're in the office and when they're not. There are other teams that I do feel maybe don't play nice in the sandbox as it is. And so does this challenge create something even more of a distance for them in the organization, right? So if they're already a challenging structure between 2 departments, 3 departments, by having people away and not collaborating, is that a concern? Or can we turn it to an advantage, right? Or and sometimes we have to make decisions. I think certain management structures, you need to be in the office to coach and manage and lead your teams. I don't think it does well from a distance. And so those are all accommodations, but those are all done at an individual level. I'm not leading by saying this is the rule of the company. I lead by saying here's my philosophy, but I'm absolutely about if the manager and the other senior leadership team have an argument for why this will work, great. But I want to see the high performing metrics that go along with it. I think we've done some really interesting things with some of our teams, and that leadership person has created a dashboard and metrics that we'll monitor to see whether this has been working well. And part of it is our customer is not just the hospital and surgeon. Our customer is our sales teams, our distributor teams. Are they happy with the structure, right? Are they happy with working from a distance? Do they feel like their needs are being met? And so that's the kind of metrics we set up to make sure they still are high performing. Yeah.
So let's, one more quick question before we get to some rapid fire questions here. This is a 2-part question. As you said, you just did a recent acquisition here not too long ago. You're in medical device. Is there any leadership philosophies that you've latched onto over your career that you think would be great to share with our listeners? And the second part of that question is decision making, big strategic decisions throughout the company. Is there any processes or frameworks that you really like to latch onto that you think would benefit other leaders? So leadership philosophy as you're going through big decisions, and then actually decision frameworks.
Yeah, I think they're kind of well aligned in how I view them. From a leadership perspective, I think that certainly senior leadership has a requirement that they have to be out in front of their teams, articulating the vision. It's just really basic, right? Articulating the vision, bringing inspiration and passion to that vision, and then what are you doing to have a structure that you can lead them to that ultimate vision and strategy for the organization. But that intertwines with, you have to trust your leaders. And if you don't have leaders that you trust, then you have to make the right replacements and bring in folks that inspire. And I think the toughest thing we have as an organization as we're growing and the pace that we're growing, do we have leaders that can expand and that can truly inspire even through this growth rate? I think you run into a challenge, especially with startups, that you bring aboard people that have the knowledge and the base to help you drive the business, but then as you grow, are they inspiring other leaders to lift, right? Are they scaling? I mean, it's a word we use a lot. Do we have executives that can scale to the needs of the organization? And that becomes the biggest challenge, because what may have been good when we were being spun out as a company and then driving this new innovation platform may not be good as we get into 20% growth rates, right? Or they may be really talented leaders that we can train, motivate, inspire along with that process. And so that becomes kind of the challenge, I think, now in the leadership situation that we're in is, are we sure that they're driving their leaders? Like right now, I want to make sure we have a very diverse workforce. I want to make sure we have a diverse management base. Are we doing a good job of picking those leaders in the organization and grooming them and mentoring them to become the future for our teams, right? And that's when I think when you're all moving so fast and so hard in one direction, you lose track sometimes of what are you doing to mentor and motivate. And so that becomes, I think, the leadership challenge in this new world post-COVID, especially with as we talked about previously, the work from home and work from the office. How are leaders really continuing to advance, mentor, motivate, and make that part of their core objectives?
Any more questions, Craig? Or
You want to go to rapid fire, or you want me to do another one?
If you got a question.
All right, I got one.
I think for one more.
But I think he was going there is the concept of innovation, right? The innovation process. You made a comment before we started about kind of moving from a legacy product base to a newer product base, right? I will use the wrong terms, but how do you, in your company, how do you create innovation? How do you motivate your team? Is there a structure to say, I want to be ahead on these new products, and what are they going to be? What do you do to do that?
Yeah, it's funny going back even to when we first spun the organization. I do, as I may have mentioned before, I do a new employee lunch after 6 months just to get a feel for how their onboarding has gone, and it's a group session, and it really has some interesting dynamics. But even before that, I did, when I first started, I realized there's a few hundred people that I don't know, so I did do consistent lunches to meet, the entire employee base. And one of the questions that came up is in line with this. They said, this Medtronic's known for this, and Stryker's known for that in spine, and NuVasive's known for this. What are we going to be known for, right? Which is a completely fair question. And I said that I gave the example, like right now 70% of our revenue is coming from products 7 years or older, and we need to, over the next 3 to 5 years, completely transition that to 70% of the revenue coming from products 3 years or newer. And I said to do that, we have to start really focusing on innovation. We're going to be the most prolific, innovative company in the business. And kind of the challenge was, well, okay, so what's the big project going to be? And I got a little critical. I said, just want to state that over the past 3 years, there hasn't been one full launch by this organization, right? We talk about product launches, but they're small launches. I mean, now when we launch something, it's 60, 70 trays, that not trays, but true sets of that implant system. Then they were launching 5, so it's more like a test. And so I said, just to be critical, we're not even getting on base. We're getting walks. So I want to make sure we're getting hits and getting to first and second. And then we show that consistently. We start showing that in our pipeline. We'll swing for the fences. I'm the first to stand up and say, this organization's ready to swing for the fences. Let's take some risks. And so this acquisition is one of those, right? I mean, making this kind of bigger move is a demonstration to the organization that we have things in place on the innovative front, but this is a disruptive technology. It's what we call enabling technologies in spine. It literally is taking like the technology from Tesla, where you have image-based camera vision systems, and using that in surgery to give guidance to the surgeon, right? So now we have this enabling technology that does safer surgery, and we provide the implants that then can be used for that procedure. But again, it was getting folks to understand that innovation just isn't me standing up saying we're going to invest and I'll go out and help raise money with our CFO and we'll have a balance sheet that can support this innovation. It was about changing the entire mentality of an organization, right? And yeah, I know they're excited and they want to swing for the fences, but you haven't even demonstrated you know what to do once you get on base. Right. And so
I'm going to follow on before I start rapid fire, and then I'll go rapid fire because we don't have much time left. But do you get right down to the tactical level, like how people sit in the office, how the office is designed, everything gets right there?
Yeah, it's good.
So change it all, right? Haworth College of Business is a furniture company, right? So do you get right down to that tactical level where
we
have to redesign where everybody sits, redesign how they interact, and you guys really did that?
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's about collaboration, and we got marketing and development teams closer together because they're the ones that drive innovation. We made sure that the quality teams and the handoff that goes to engineering and regulatory and everywhere else is all part of the same group. Kind of a funny story, when we started, the company was a little bit further east, and it was 3 different buildings, right? It was 2 buildings, and we need to look for a third. And the guidance I got, it was a board that was brand new to me, and it was already put together, was, you really don't need to be worrying about that. You need to worry about the spin. And my comment was, no, I'm very worried about it. Like, I'm going to establish a new culture here, and we're not going to establish it by being in a bunch of different buildings. Like, we need to be in one building, and we need to have everyone accountable to what the innovation strategy is for the company. And it's got to be felt by everyone. And they all have to be close by when it's not going well to work as teams, and they got to be close by when we're really doing some great work in the cadaver lab and designing a new product. And so we were fortunate that we found a building that was available. We actually got subsidized by a much larger company that got acquired the organization. The building was empty, so we are fully subsidized by.
There seemed to be some commercial real estate space over the last year.
Yeah, I mean we're extremely fortunate. I mean I think we got in at $1 a square foot, which is unheard of in Carlsbad, California, and we have an ocean view, and we're called SeaSpine. So we really do have an amazing facility, and it just was fortunate. And actually, it's probably one of those things that it worked out really well because the board was super excited that I got a good deal, and we were excited because we were all in one space. But as soon as we got to that space, we said, okay, now we're going to change the whole way we communicate and collaborate. It's got to be team style. It's got to be marketing with development, and regulatory's close by for what their needs are. Quality's close by, and everything is in that one facility. And we even, for the Irvine facility that is manufacturing, we even brought down their marketing and development so that now we're one big team. We're no longer all these separate entities, and we're actually working on projects together. And one of the beautiful unintended outcomes was you had biologics team that was helping the implant team, and the implant team was helping and that was never being done before. And now they're seamlessly collaborating.
So can I just close that? Because he did the baseball analogy, so I got to say something. But first of all, go Red Sox. But
Tigers, you mean?
No, I meant Red Sox. But
Anyway.
but everything you just said was awesome. And the baseball analogy, what I heard was the manager of a team, the best thing they can do to create the culture on their baseball team is by where they place their players in the locker room, where they place them in their lockers, right? So if Craig needs to be next to Joe, then that's where my locker goes, because that's where you spend your time and that's where you work. So everything you just walk through in business is kind of that same point. It's we build culture by who we put working together and how we give them the environment to do that. And when we need to adjust, you move their locker, right? Or when the team says, I've done what I need to do and I need to do something else, you move their locker. So that concept of placement, which gets to the work from home, work in the office discussion, again, becomes incredibly important. But as a CEO, just creating those intentional collisions of people, that changes your culture. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I'll add to that, because we're learning from education. Where we're sitting right now is an innovative education space, right? And I was surprised at the difference in the way students behaved when they come here versus going in a tiered lecture classroom. It is, and so, and then again, Haworth is a furniture company. Our school's named after them, but when you go there and you see the difference in the way people behave based on how their space is, how it's laid out, how it's designed, it's tremendous. And so we try to match pedagogy to space and think that far ahead. And when you get really deliberate, the changes are amazing. So it's really good to hear that let's get everybody in one building, create a space where they're innovative. And I'll give Trustee Trevan here a shout out. He said, just looking out the window and being downtown changes you versus being on a university campus. It's little things like that.
Imagine what it'd be like looking at the ocean.
Yeah, in Carlsbad, because I know there's some good golf companies there, so I want to come visit now. Yeah. I'm running the next, Craig and I will run the next Texas trip.
We were competing against the golf company that wanted to move in the building, but they were asking for a year delay till they moved in, so they actually went with us. So we were lucky. We beat out Puma Golf.
So Doug and I are going to come visit. We'll make a California trip. Craig can join us. Trustee Trevan, you can come too. So let's go rapid fire. Now Doug always does this, so it's my first time doing it. So it's rapid fire questions. We try to make people give one-word answers. So can you stick to one-word answers?
I can try.
We forgot to warn Craig, and he didn't stick to it. And other people haven't. So courage or compassion?
Compassion.
Speed or accuracy?
Speed.
If their favorite leader?
Oh boy, I have a lot. So, it's supposed to be a one-word answer. This one's a hard one for me because there's business leaders that I ultimately respect for the teams they've created, and then there's leaders that I respect because of the culture and the magic of their culture. And if I had to pick one or the other right now, I think with COVID, it would be, those executives that really created magical cultures, right? And a lot of what would be the early stages of the great things that Google created, in their culture and accountability, or even how Apple, created cultures of incredible, accountability, but also magical cultures. I mean, it's kind of hard not to like the success story of Jobs, right?
Okay, so I'm going to pin you down then on that one with another one word. Great ideas or great execution?
Great execution.
Okay, do you have a favorite leadership book that you think every leader should read?
One that always influenced me to think about how you're being efficient in your communication with mentoring and coaching is just simply the 1 Minute Manager, right? Just that whole idea of how to motivate, but also, lack of a better word, to discipline or to redirect and do that effectively. And both are extremely important. There's also been great books that have inspired and continue to inspire our culture of just, accountability and trust, right? And
that's Ken Blanchard's work,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
And using the right nomenclature in a trust environment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good stuff there. So, 2 more questions. You're entering a dangerous jungle, and we call this the jungle, and that is a very difficult business task that you have to take on. You're assigned to it. Who do you bring with you?
The senior leadership team that I have, after going through the crisis we just went through, would be absolutely the inner circle. We could pare it down depending on what the challenge was to make sure everyone's being efficient. But after what we just went through COVID, I'm loyal to my leadership team.
Did you answer the same way, by the way, Craig? I think you answered that question.
I think we're very similar in our answers to a question.
You said your team, right?
Yeah,
I'm taking my team. Last question. If you had there was an animal on Earth that reflected your leadership style, which animal?
This is the hardest question.
Gosh, it's funny you say it, and there's so many animals that have such unique characteristics, but probably, just the nature of, strangely, keeps popping in my mind, an elephant of loyalty and how they care. They have a unique ability to be loyal, compassionate, but also protective, right? And there's a part, I think, of what we went through this past year and a half, 2 years, where I feel that's a lot of what was being required, and I enjoyed. If there's an enjoyment of what we went through the past year and a half, it was getting a lot of motivation out of having a safe and effective work environment and caring about the SeaSpine family.
Yeah, that's a great
answer.
That's a great answer. And they have really long memories, don't they? I thought elephants had super long memories. They do. And yeah, you see some of the videos of them when a lion is attacking a baby, they all surround and they can be aggressive at times. Yeah, that's a great one. I think the first one is the elephant. Yeah. And I usually ask why. Doug usually asks these, and I usually ask why, but you described it. That was a great description. So, Keith, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Craig, congratulations on your Distinguished Alumni Award a couple years ago. Keith, congratulations on being the Haworth College of Business Distinguished Alumni Award winner. We tried we've innovated to a new podcast style and space, and I think it worked out. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you have a great
Enjoyed our conversation.
Fantastic.
Yeah.